How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Mardiege, as always, and on today's show, we're going to talk about some more breaking news that happened today, this morning, regarding some more trades in the wide receiver market. Obviously, the biggest news, DeAndre Hopkins being traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to talk about that, break that down, and how much that really helps Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Also, we're going to talk about the speculation about the Los Angeles Rams potentially trading their wide receiver, Cooper Kupp. There's been some more growing news in that regard, and it looks like the Rams are willing to trade their star wide receiver, and we're going to get into that as well. Plus some more things down the line, like Tua possibly being set to return this upcoming week against the Arizona Cardinals, plus some more later on in the show, so stick around to watch that. But before we do get started, I'd like to remind you guys, as I always do, if you have any questions or comments or just want to get involved with the show in any way you can, we always want to hear about it. Don't hesitate to drop any of those things in the chat. And now, if you do want to be part of the show and want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out, you can feature on the show now by using the new Super Chat feature that we have available to you guys. Just by clicking the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. So we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we always appreciate it when you guys are able to do that for us. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, and hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. We always thank you guys for getting involved. It always makes the show better, and just hearing what you guys have to say on any topic really is always a great thing to see with these live shows. So that is that. But moving on now to the biggest piece of news that just hit this morning. I was just barely waking up when I saw this news, and it threw everything off because, this morning the ESPN broke the news, ESPN's Adam Schefter, that the Chiefs and the Tennessee Titans were finalizing a deal to trade for DeAndre Hopkins. Kansas City seemingly finds their replacement for their misfortunes that they've had so far at the wide receiver position. Rashee Rice got hurt, severe knee injury. Hollywood Brown, a pretty severe shoulder injury as well. So the Chiefs haven't looked as much as themselves as they have, obviously. And Andre, welcome to the show. I'm shocked by this Kupp news. It kind of makes sense, though he's been super unreliable recently, and although if he goes to the right team, he 100% boosts their chances at a deep playoff run. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. Cooper Kupp, I was pretty surprised by it too, and I'm going to talk about it more in the next segment. But yeah, the injuries do scare me if I am, somebody else trying to trade for Cooper Kupp, and also a second-round pick. Knowing all those circumstances is a little bit steep for me, but something could potentially change that asking price that I will get into. But yeah, if he goes to the right spot and he's able to stay healthy, I can see him. If he goes to, I'm kind of blanking on who needs a wide receiver right now, like desperately. I don't want to say the Steelers because I'm a Steelers fan, and I'm probably the only Steelers fan that you would hear say that, but I don't know, it would feel too surreal, honestly. I wouldn't be able to believe it. But yeah, Cooper Kupp, great player overall. And, unfortunate that he hurt his ankle so early on because he was balling out the first 2 weeks. And it was it was really looking like it was going to shape out to be another crazy year. But those injuries popped up again. But that'll be more in the next segment. But sticking to DeAndre Hopkins, right? Immediate replacement for what the Chiefs are looking for. Also, Juju Smith-Schuster, who they had come in as a potential replacement, he also got hurt as well, and he's already been ruled out for this upcoming week. So the wide receiver options for this Chiefs team were getting a little low, and plus Isaiah Pacheco is also probably out for the entire year. Not a wide receiver, but still it's one less X-factor kind of player that the Chiefs have that they're usually accustomed to having, right? And then for all those guys to just be wiped out, it has looked rough, it has looked ugly, but what's ironic and funny about this entire thing is that they're the only undefeated team, and they just went out and traded for DeAndre Hopkins, who is 32 years old. He is on the final year of his 2-year contract that he signed with the Tennessee Titans last offseason, and he became a serious trade candidate over the last couple weeks because of that contract. You don't have to be attached to him long term because that contract is up. 32 also, the older receivers, the older players are always trade candidates, and also the fact that the Titans are 1-5 right now. So, it doesn't look like they're going to go anywhere just from the record alone, and that could tell a different story. But if you watch them play, Will Levis hasn't really been there. It doesn't look like they're going to get any better, obviously, with Mason Rudolph, going in there and playing. So the Titans were in a tough spot for Hopkins that needs to get the most, production out of himself with these older years now in the NFL. So those rumors now come into fruition, and it looks like he's going to be going to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are expected to send a 5th-round pick over to the Titans that could become a 4th-round pick through some circumstances. That wasn't really specified, but they could get a conditional 4th-round pick out of this. And now DeAndre Hopkins becomes the 3rd wide receiver over the last 8 days to be traded, with the November 5th deadline quickly approaching in less than, what's today, the 23rd? Less than 2 weeks now. So that's something else to watch out for. These trades are probably going to start flying off the board, like we mentioned with Kupp. Maybe other guys like Deontay Johnson or Mike Williams is still out there. Travis Etienne is an interesting one. All these guys, after this week, I'm sure are going to start ramping up these trade talks. But DeAndre Hopkins so far, you might look at these numbers: 15 receptions, 173 yards, and only 1 touchdown. Not really that impressive. Like, the Chiefs could desperately need someone putting up these numbers, but I feel like that has more to do with just Will Levis, and the Titans overall as an offense haven't really clicked anything into gear thus far. And Hopkins, I feel like, is too good to just be in Tennessee, where their season is pretty much already over. So I love this move for Hopkins, and now quarterback wise, also like I just mentioned with Will Levis and what Hopkins had to go through there. Quarterback wise, night and day, right? Complete ends, different ends of the spectrum, with going from Will Levis on one end to immediately jumping all the way to the top with Patrick throwing you the ball. Must be surreal. Unquestionably the best quarterback DeAndre Hopkins has ever had, and he's probably had arguably he probably has the largest roster of quarterbacks that he's played with, arguably, in just his entire career. So right now, with Patrick, easily the best quarterback he's ever had throwing him the ball. And, for DeAndre to fit into this offense, it's not like DeAndre's going out there routing anybody up or blowing by people anymore. And that might be a reason for some people to not be so overly excited about him. But I really believe that alongside Travis, alongside this Chiefs team that has really kind of molded itself now into more of a run-heavy, defensive-heavy based team, that they don't need DeAndre to go out there and average like 8 to 10 catches per game or finish with over 1,200 yards or something like that. They don't really need that, and they're doing just fine because, like I said, they need a wide receiver, it seems like, but they're the only undefeated team so far. So, by one, way you could think of it, they don't really need anybody because they haven't lost yet. Or just by watching their games, you could see that Patrick has looked more uncomfortable, and he's thrown more interceptions than passing touchdowns thus far. And all through the Chiefs really not playing efficient, clean football, they're still 6-0. So adding a guy like Hopkins, and depending on how quickly he learns the playbook and everything like that, it's going to take a week or two, I'd assume. But this is still a great move. I'm a big fan of it. I always felt like this was the most appropriate move for Hopkins, for the Chiefs, just because it is that short-term solution. Because Hopkins, they don't have to have him on the team next year. If they want to just let him hit free agency, they could do that with their young receivers eventually coming back. So it's a win for both sides. The Titans, maybe you would want something else back more for DeAndre Hopkins, but they would probably take anything right now. They're still a work in progress. So lastly here, just mentioning with this trade, now Hopkins seemingly making the Chiefs it covers up their biggest blemish, right? Are they the favorites now, unquestionably, to win the AFC 1, but also Super Bowl favorites? I wouldn't necessarily say that it puts them at number 1, because I felt like they were top 3 anyway in terms of favorites for the Super Bowl or the conference. So I think all it really does, it just solidifies them up there. We're not going to see a huge drop where the Chiefs aren't playing well and it finally catches up to them and they just fall apart. We're not going to see that now, certainly, with Hopkins there. As long as he could stay healthy and the quicker he learns the playbook, I feel like it's almost going to be as smooth as a transition as Amari Cooper going to the Bills, right? When you're playing with a set idea, set identity, and the type of quarterback, top 2, top 3 quarterback, it's going to work out as long as they stay healthy. I'm 100% certain that Andy Reid is going to find a way to use DeAndre Hopkins and use him to the best of his ability. So I love the trade. I think it's a great fit for the Chiefs, and we'll see how quickly he learns it and gets up to speed starting in Week 8 against, I believe they are playing, it's escaping my mind now. The Chiefs are playing this week, and potentially Hopkins' first game, they are going to be playing the Raiders. So, they were probably going to be favored anyway, but it could be a better game overall for the Chiefs if Hopkins can, make his mark on that game just starting off his career there with the Chiefs. So that is one trade. That's one trade that has been finalized. In this next segment, there's been a lot of talk about Cooper Kupp and the potential of him being traded from the Los Angeles Rams, and the Rams being pretty adamant about, that possibility becoming a certainty over the next couple of weeks. So how are the Rams trying to do this? Is it a good idea for them to start calling teams asking for who's interested in Cooper Kupp? I'll give my thoughts on that and more on what Cooper Kupp had to say about the trade rumors when we return after our first break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to start off and continue the show talking about a very heavy wide receiver market that has become active once again. Now knowing that DeAndre Hopkins is going to the Kansas City Chiefs, we have to talk about this other potential blockbuster move that could happen eventually, maybe with Cooper Kupp and the Los Angeles Rams, the star receiver for the Rams. We started hearing last week the reports about how Cooper Kupp could be an interesting piece to watch out for as the trade deadline approaches, right? Because the Rams were having a bit of a tough go at it just because, the record and whatnot and things like that, everybody getting injured. It was not looking great for them, right, heading into the trade deadline. For as talented as they were, the record is what it was. So obviously that impacts the season. And that was last week, right? I didn't pay too much attention to it because, we're talking about Cooper Kupp, the best player other than Aaron Donald, that he is now retired, right? So Cooper Kupp is the guy for the Los Angeles Rams, right? When I think of the Rams, I immediately think of Cooper Kupp and how talented he is, obviously being drafted there, and just how he's grown into the player that he is now. I would have never imagined that this would ever become a conversation, but now this week, the rumors have only gained momentum, and because according to the report from The Athletic, I think just a couple of days ago or over the weekend, the Rams are reportedly talking to multiple teams about potentially trading Kupp, and the Rams want a second-round pick for him, and they're willing to take on some of Cooper Kupp's salary this upcoming season in order to get the deal done. And it just feels surreal to me that I've said those words about the Rams because, it's one thing that other teams are calling. Some teams are calling the Jets, I'm sure, about Garrett Wilson. But it's another thing that, if the reports turn out to be true by The Athletic, it's another thing that the Rams are actively calling other teams to gauge their interest in trying to get the guy on their team, right? And also, you might say, all right, well, that might not be too different. They're doing their due diligence, right? Just in case they have to do it. All right. But also, the fact that they're willing to take on the salary as well makes it seem like it's a little bit overboard, right? Like, they maybe, want to, or maybe accepting the idea now that they want to move on from Cooper Kupp. And I'm not too sold on that mindset so far for the Rams. And, it's just weird because I don't personally like the idea because I think Los Angeles has a great thing going here with Kupp, with Puka, with their young defense, Kyren Williams, and Matthew Stafford. They're just very unfortunate here to start the season with how talented the NFC is, and the fact that they just got hurt. Basically, their entire team got hurt in the first 2 weeks, and now, obviously there are some tough games on their schedule, and they can't overcome the talent barrier there, right? Because Cooper Kupp obviously injured the majority of the start of the season, and Matthew Stafford, being 36 years old, can't do it all himself, right? So I just feel like they have a good thing going here. So to think of this idea of not blowing the entire thing up, but really taking away a big chunk of it, I'm very hesitant about it. And Cooper Kupp even reacted to some of these trade rumors, and he had something to say about it over the last couple days here, and just about the potential of being traded. And he said, I'm aware of it, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be where my feet are. That's all I know. I have a job to do here, and I take a lot of pride in doing everything I can for the guys in this building and being able to step on the field knowing that I prepare the best that I can. So, said a lot, but not really saying too much, right? In the same, sentence. He's heard the news. That's the biggest thing about this, is he's aware of it, but he's not really thinking too much about it, especially with them having to play already tomorrow against a very hot Minnesota Vikings team. And, Kupp is set to return tomorrow, right? He has been away for a month, maybe a little bit over a month, recovering from that high ankle sprain, and now he is set to make his return in tomorrow night's game against the Vikings, and he hasn't played since September 15th. He's only played 2 weeks, but you look at the production he has given the Rams. Just in those 2 weeks, he's recorded 18 receptions, 147 yards, and a touchdown, which is nuts for just the first 2 weeks. That's almost like 80 or 70 yards per game, and like 9 receptions per game as well in those 2 games. And obviously he is still capable of doing that. He's not too old either. He's 31 years old, but those injuries are certainly something to watch out for, because he only played 9 games in 2022, and also last year he played in 12 games. So he's always dealing with some sort of injury, at least it seems, over the last couple of seasons. So that might stop some people from trading away a second round pick, albeit for one of the best receivers over the last, handful of years. That might seem like a tall asking price, because teams, depending on who it is, I don't know how far they're planning into the future. So can you rely on Cooper Kupp going forward? Is a second round pick a price you're willing to pay, taking on that risk that he might get hurt again next season or anything like that, and also taking in his contract? Not all of it, obviously, because the Rams are willing to pay some of it. But what's super interesting to me about these rumors is the fact of how everything can change, especially with a team really teetering on the premises of still staying the course and being fully invested into this year, or starting to really think about next season, and maybe you trade away a piece or two here and you don't really put too much onus on this year because, in other words, you essentially give up in a way is what I'm trying to say without actually saying it. And it doesn't sound great. You know, we've seen the Browns already do it, trading away Amari Cooper, and they're 1-6 also right now with no Deshaun Watson because of his injury. So they're pretty much a team that has done that. You look at the Carolina Panthers with their record and trying to shop potentially one of their players as well to get something back for them. And it's going to be interesting, like I said, because that one factor that I think could really change everything is the fact that I believe that tomorrow's game, the Thursday night game, is going to be huge for the Rams and just for us kind of understanding where this Rams team is going and where they're going to end up in 2024. Because right now they're sitting at 2-4, and tomorrow hosting the Minnesota Vikings, if they lose this game, they're going to be 2-5, obviously. And at 2-5, that seems almost like too steep of a hill to climb out of, even if you do get back some of those guys, like, you know, Puka comes back and Cooper Kupp obviously is going to come back tomorrow. But even if you get everybody back, it might still seem like too steep of a hole to get out of, especially in the NFC, like we said, that is very competitive with a lot of teams, you know, a lot of surprise teams also coming up out of nowhere. I don't know if they're really going to be able to just fully click everything back into gear and just try and get back into the playoffs. I mean, they could. There's technically a chance, but I don't know how likely it is that they do that. So, if they do lose tomorrow, and what's even more like a chess match sort of cat and mouse game with this is that if they do lose tomorrow, it increases the possibility for me that they are going to try and shop a guy like Cooper Kupp. And other teams, knowing that now, might think, well, they want to sell him now because their season isn't going anywhere. Why are we going to pay a second-round pick knowing that they're going to want to trade him anyway? So let's hold off and see how real, I guess, desperate the Rams get and how much they lower that asking price. And then when it goes to a third or a fourth-round pick, probably if the Rams really want to get rid of Cooper Kupp, then you buy yourself some more time, you push it towards the deadline, and you might get a better deal out of it if you're the Steelers or if you're in like the Commanders or something like that, and you're needing still a wide receiver. That's where it gets pretty fascinating, right? Because if the Rams win somehow, then you don't really know what's going on. Maybe the Rams think that at that point they're going to be 3-4. I'm assuming they believe that they're going to go after it this year, but you know, maybe next week after this week they lose and everything changes again. That's what's so fascinating to me about this scenario, because it's so based on the results obviously coming up, and we're not talking about the long-term results, right, of an entire season. We're talking about a November 5th deadline that really sends everybody scrambling. And over the last few years, we've seen a lot of trade deadline sort of moves get done. Not as much as the NBA or anything like that, but it feels like with this new group of general managers, with this new, I don't know, I guess age group of coaches and general managers, like I said, they're more willing to get some of those deals done. We've already seen two pretty big ones happen. We already saw another one happening this morning. This could be another one that could be just on the premises of happening, all based on these results. So it seems like it could be likely, but also it's based on tomorrow, essentially. We're just going to have to wait until tomorrow to see how the Rams look, to see what the sensations are if they lose, and I believe they will lose. I'm going to predict them to lose because, you know, the Vikings, I just feel like, are a better team right now, and the Rams just don't have everybody. If once they go to 2-5, in my opinion, then it'll really get interesting, because if that is the case, I wouldn't be surprised if they, you know, speed this deal up and maybe get it done in the weekend or maybe it just gets elongated, like I said. But the last thing I will say on this, with Cooper Kupp and how it affects this entire thing for the Rams, is that, you know, it's one thing trading Cooper Kupp, right? You might think, all right, well, they still have Puka. Maybe it's not that big of a loss, right, if you didn't have Puka, right, obviously. But I also find myself asking, you know, what do you do with Matthew Stafford, right? With an older quarterback, 36 years old, you're not going to put more on his plate now going forward and expect you to be in the race towards the end of the year what do you do with him? Do you start taking calls about Matthew Stafford? Does he start to entertain, possibilities of moving on, knowing that you just traded away his best target, his most reliable target? Is he really committed to this team, or are the Rams just thinking of blowing up the quarterback position and the wide receiver position and, saying, their goodbyes to 2024 and just looking towards the future by acquiring some high draft picks for their quarterback and their wide receiver? Because again, it wouldn't make too much sense to me if you want to believe in this year that you could really do something, you wouldn't trade away Cooper Kupp. That's why, the Browns, even if they won't admit that they've punted away this year, you don't say you're not punting and trade Amari Cooper in the same breath. That makes no sense. So if they do trade Cooper Kupp, I will be interested to see how the timeline all plays out and whether or not, the interest in Matthew Stafford also heightens because of the fact that it wouldn't make too much sense to keep him then also if, there is still that possibility that he might not even play next year anyway based on how his contract and everything there is around that. So there's a lot riding on this move, right? It's not just Cooper Kupp, it's the future of the Rams and what they could get out of it, and also Matthew Stafford as well. I think we're going to learn a lot more, though, after tomorrow's game, whether or not the Rams win or lose against a red-hot Minnesota Vikings. So that is all the trade talk we're going to get to today, but it's not the last player we're going to mention specifically because in our next segment, we've talked a lot about the recaps of these games, but we haven't really mentioned the idea that Tua Tagovailoa is getting set to return already from his concussion. He is targeting this upcoming week against the Arizona Cardinals to make his return, and he has some things to say on Monday. We're going to react to them and just our overall thoughts on this Dolphins team and how much of a change Tua can really make for a 2-4 team that doesn't look ready to make a jump even more than what they did last year. So we're going to talk about Tua and what he said in his press conference on Monday when we return.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back now on the show to talk about something that has kind of gone over our heads a little bit here on the show, and that's the pending return of Tua Tagovailoa from his latest concussion, obviously suffered in Week 2 against the Buffalo Bills. A very scary sight again, right? Because it is his third concussion, I believe, and the way that he went down again, the way that he reacted once he was down, and just that the idea that this could be happening again to Tua was very scary to see, was very unfortunate to see for Tua and the Dolphins organization, right? Obviously having to deal with that and seeing a player that they drafted go through that again is not good for anybody, right? So that was about a month or so ago, and now after the time being where he was placed on the IR and now that time is up after the 4 weeks, the Dolphins officially activated him off of the IR, and head coach Mike Macdonald said, I believe last week, that he does expect Tua to play again in 2024. So over the last month or 2.5 months, we were going to see Tua again. It was just a matter of when. But now, starting on Monday, head coach Mike Macdonald again told the reporters that Tua will return to practice today with a goal to play against the Arizona Cardinals this upcoming Sunday in Week 8. McDaniel stated that the medical experts have deemed it be they deemed it that it was safe for Tua to return to practice after I'm sure a lot of tests were done on Tua and just continuing to monitor his progress. According to Mike McDaniel, he said that the medical experts said it was okay for Tua to return, and he also has not officially cleared concussion protocol. He still has to do all of that, but he can't do that unless he returns to practice. So today was supposed to be his first day. I don't think anything went wrong. So I'm assuming that he was there, and over the next, few days leading up into Sunday, I'm sure he's going to go through the protocol and try to pass the protocol so he's able to play this upcoming Sunday. And it seems like, I don't know if it's just me, it feels like only 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago that I saw Tua get hurt. It doesn't feel like a month at all. But apparently it obviously has been that, and now this is becoming a possibility after all the talk of other people commenting on whether or not he should retire or whether or not the Dolphins should let him play. Should they let him come back? Should Tua just think about his long-term health and all those things? All of that stuff is personal, pretty much, and it was always going to be up to Tua, obviously. So I gave my thoughts on it, but I never felt like Tua, the way that he is, the way that he carries himself around the game of football and how much his family is invested in it, I never got the sense that he was really thinking about, retiring. And after this latest concussion, it wasn't a feeling or a vibe that I got from Tua, just from the things that were said about him or him really not saying too much on it. I feel like it would have made more noise if he was actually thinking of retiring. So with all that being the case, now we're here, right? Now we're at the moment where he has just one more hurdle to get over before we do see him back on a football field. And Tua also spoke on Monday, and he had some interesting things to say of just his thoughts on giving his comments about what this return could be like for him. And after a month of just resting and reportedly meeting with several neurologists to determine the viability of his return, Tua said that all of them cleared him to continue playing. So that was to be expected, right? When he got up the field, it wasn't like he was too groggy. He looked a little bit lightheaded, but everybody knew that he was going to pass the test. He was going to pass the protocols and everything like that. It was just more so, again, a personal decision by Tua on whether or not he wanted to run the risk of this happening once again and how that could affect him, long term. Obviously, it's nothing to take serious, but obviously Tua is here now, and he said that he never considered retiring despite seeing all the stuff and all the opinions said over the last month or so about him and his career. He also mentioned how he was actually symptom-free since the day after the concussion, after that Bills game. So that's a good sign. Obviously, it wasn't that serious, like I said, just from looking at it through the television. But according to Tua himself, he said that there was no symptoms just a day after. Also, he said that he wouldn't be wearing a Guardian cap. That was another question that was asked on Monday from one of the media members. And I think they also brought it up because his fellow teammate, Devon Achane, also had a concussion that he was dealing with. And this past week, he wore a Guardian cap when he made his return from a concussion. But, Tua said that he wouldn't be wearing a Guardian cap because it was a personal choice not to wear it. And I think that just says a lot about him anyway, of how much, he wasn't going to retire, basically, because if he's not even going to wear a Guardian cap and really not, consider any of these other methods, maybe like changing his helmet or anything like that, to maybe prevent this from happening again, it just fuels the idea more that he was never really going to retire. He almost like embraces the fact that, this is a dangerous sport, but almost in a way saying like he doesn't really care. He loves it so much that he's willing to do this yet again. So he said it was a personal choice not to wear a Guardian cap. Also mentioning that he didn't pay attention to anyone's opinion on his health, but he did thank most of the people and all the people that genuinely asked and cared about how he was doing health-wise. So, that was a nice gesture. And he just also said that he has to be smarter playing going forward, right? Maybe considering those hits he could take or sliding a different way or maybe not running as much. He overall said that he has to play smarter and that he doesn't obviously want to be known for these concussions, for this reputation that he has built up, unfortunately, for the 3 concussions that he has had up until this point. But he does accept and is at peace pretty much with the fact that, in his own words, these are the cards that I've been dealt. So it seems like he's not tormenting himself too much over that. And the last thing he said was really interesting to me, because he said that basically there's risk in everything. He said that from waking up, from driving, from everybody in the NFL basically running the risk of getting hurt on any play, on any given Sunday, just playing for your team, just going through your normal day. But if something goes terribly wrong, everybody runs the risk. It's not just him. And he finished it off by saying, there's just risk in any and everything. I'm willing to play the odds on that. So, again, it was a pretty cool quote to say. You know, he's going to play the odds. He's going to take the risk because that's how much he loves the game of football. And he also brought up something else about how, you know, people don't consider boxers in the same, you know, breath, because they also have to do a very serious job, right? Risking their lives going out there, or hockey players doing a lot of the same thing. And it makes sense what he's saying, but also I think more so with boxing, you kind of subconsciously accept the fact that these guys are just wailing on each other. Even in the UFC as well, there is that potential with how some of these hard-hitting hits, punches, and kicks, you know, sort of land on their opponents. But with football, you don't really acknowledge it too much to kind of, you know, push back on his point, because it hasn't really happened too often. Yes, it is a violent game, but it doesn't really happen to this degree that it has happened to Tua, unfortunately. And also, you know, it's very context-based, right? It could be taken very seriously for maybe Tua, but for other players, maybe not so much, and it might not seem fair for Tua, but that's just, you know, how it is. Not everybody takes the same sort of hit the same way. Some people react differently from it. Fortunately for others, they're not really affected too much by it. And, you know, it's all just based on each and every individual. So, you know, it is what it is now. Tua is going to play again in 2024. Whether or not he makes it this week is a whole other thing, but it won't be long before we see him yet again. But now my question is, you know, with Tua, how much is he really going to help out this Dolphins team, right? Because they've been looking really bad with the fact that Tua has gone out. And some people will say that, you know, that's their fault also for not being prepared or having a good backup for when and if Tua ever got hurt again. Because really looking at this Dolphins team, they are last in the NFL in points per game. They've lost their last 3 out of their last 4 games, and they're 2-4 right now. And Tua will certainly help, you know, coming off of this concussion, obviously, assuming that he can just pick it up right where he left off. But to push back on that point, on the Dolphins maybe not really having a bigger jump with Tua coming back than most people think. They haven't been so bad, you know, defensively especially. They're top 4 in yards allowed per game, and they also have allowed the least amount of passing yards per game. So with that being the case, and kind of showing both sides of the argument, you could just be thinking, if they had a better quarterback, and especially Tua, who knows this system in and out, it would give him a lot better chance to maybe beat the Colts, to maybe beat or be in a closer game against the Seahawks or whatnot. It's these close games that, you know, Dolphins fans, I'm sure, definitely feel they could have won, or at least have been given a better chance if they had their quarterback. But with this now going forward and them being 2-4, it is going to help. But who they have, you know, coming up on their schedule certainly will play a factor in ultimately what happens with Tua, and what I think should happen with this organization. And we just finished talking about the Rams maybe calling it a little bit early on their season, just because the record sort of suggests that they're not going to come back from that deficit. And the Dolphins find themselves in the same thing, because to me, if this team goes to 2-5, it would raise serious questions and concerns to me about the fact that maybe you just, again, I don't like saying that you just quit and throw away this season, but just maybe you you start thinking about the years to come, and maybe you start planning on other ways to improve this team for 2025, because Mike McDaniel's not going anywhere. He signed an extension, and if Tua is able to stay healthy, he's not going anywhere. He just got signed to a whole lot of money. Maybe if you go to 2-5 or 2-6 over your next 2 games, you start thinking about maybe just saying to Tua, like, hey, you know what, this season it's just not there. Why don't you just focus on your health? We don't want to risk you getting hurt in these meaningless games that could affect you long term. I would consider telling Tua that and kind of sitting him the rest of the year if this team goes to 2-4. Just again, because you're 2-4, these games won't really mean anything if you're not going to get into the playoffs, and you don't want to have Tua out there, especially coming off of this latest concussion, just taking hits for no reason. Now, I don't think they should, sell like Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle or trade them at the trade deadline, but it is just a very delicate situation to kind of monitor over the next couple of weeks. I believe, if they drop this next game to the Cardinals and maybe lose again to the Bills, then it's starting to become a little bit dire at that point. So I would feel like it would just be unnecessary to have Tua out there. With the medical reasons, obviously, I would consider sitting him down if they lose at most 2 or definitely 3 more games. I would just tell Tua, it's great that you came back. We appreciate it. We want to keep you as healthy as possible. Let's just sit you down and reevaluate everything at the end of the year. That's how I would feel about it. Because, again, the last thing you'd want to do is for anybody to go through that again in games that really don't mean much. That would really be the last straw, I would assume. So, but in the meantime, Tua is, if I were to guess, he is probably going to play this week. I feel like everything is kind of trending that way. So we will see Tua. We'll see how much of a difference it makes and how that will affect the plan going forward. But that is all on Tua. That is all in this segment. We have a couple more to get to on today's show, recapping our last game of Week 7, because I had to mention the Seahawks getting a big win over the Atlanta Falcons, stopping a 3-game losing streak that they were on, and also in the last segment, we're going to start previewing some of the Week 8 games, starting with the Sunday Night Football game between the Cowboys and the 49ers, a must-watch game that we're going to talk about in just a few seconds. Don't go anywhere.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping back into the action now on the Chip Shot Football podcast to recap our last game. I had to throw this last recap in here just because I thought this game was pretty significant, and it again sort of errs on the side of the fact that this NFC is so unpredictable, so just very balanced, from some of the fringe teams to some of the quote-unquote favorites to win the NFC. I think it's very even up until now, and I think this game was a perfect example of that because, like the title says, the Seahawks get back into the win column. They have a big 34-14 win over the Falcons, a game that, it was funny when I looked back on it, I labeled and predicted this game to go to the Atlanta Falcons because I said the Falcons would win because they were playing clean football and that they knew exactly what they were doing, and it turned out to be the complete opposite, because in terms of clean and sloppiness that the Falcons showed, the Falcons did not play up to those standards, obviously, by their own doing. And also, credit to Seattle's defense for, basically saying enough is enough after their last 3 games and how poorly they played. They showed up in Atlanta, and they really stuck it to the Falcons, because not only were the Falcons really kind of thrown off by a lot of credit to the Seahawks defense, but also there was a lot of penalties, a lot of sloppiness that happened from their own doing, like I said. So that was one thing, quite the opposite of what I predicted for the Falcons. So I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, the Seahawks stop a 3-game losing streak to go to 4-3, while the Falcons also go to 4-3, and they put an end to their own 3-game winning streak that they were on. 14 points also in this game by the Falcons, where they were averaging 37 points in their last 2 games. So again, it says a lot about the Falcons and how just poor they were on the day, but also the Seahawks defense, because they were giving up a lot of points also in their last couple games. So for them to only give up 14 is a huge win for them going forward. And looking at the game a little bit closer and just how it all broke down, the Seahawks came out a bit sharper in the first half, in my opinion. They took the 3-0 lead on their first drive, and then Atlanta had a chance to tie it, but Younghoe Koo missed a field goal, and like it usually happens, right, when you miss an opportunity like that, right after that, the Seahawks drive after that and score a touchdown, now taking a 10-0 lead. And luckily for the Falcons, they were able to respond on their next drive and keep it close, 10-7, but Seattle ended the half as perfectly as you would have hoped, because they chewed out the clock and they ended up scoring a touchdown there before the end of the first half, going into the halftime period 17-7 over the Atlanta Falcons on the road. And still, 10-point deficit, not that big of a deal when you're playing at home if you're the Falcons. But after that, the Falcons closed the gap once again with a touchdown to start the second half, and we're back to a 3-point game, 17-14. It was early in the second half, but shout out to the Seahawks offense as well for responding yet again with Geno throwing a touchdown pass to Kenneth Walker and again going up to 10 points, 24-14. Then Atlanta, their attempts were finalized after the strip sack fumble return for a touchdown by the Seattle Seahawks defense, and at that point, that's a huge haymaker sort of blow to take at that point in the game, because the Falcons were again down 10 points, and they're thinking, on this drive we could go back, score another touchdown, and respond yet again. But because the defense stepped up and they were able to get that turnover, not only that turnover, but return it all the way back for a touchdown, it really sucks the air out of that entire stadium. So at that point, they're up 31-14 after that fumble recovery for a touchdown. I want to say Boye Mafe, I believe that's his name, stripped it from Kirk Cousins and got the sack. And the other defensive lineman, Hall, is his last name. He returned it for a touchdown. So that was great to see. And after that, Kirk Cousins threw 2 more interceptions after that, trying to mount a comeback, trying to score points quickly. He threw a touchdown on the following drive and also the other drive right after that. So the Falcons finish with 3 turnovers on the day overall. And looking at some of the performances from this game and the stats also, just overall for both teams, you look at the game that each of them have, starting with the Seahawks. Geno Smith threw for 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, was only sacked once, and I believe this is the lowest amount of passing yards he's had in the entire 2024 season. So that if I told you that Geno was going to throw 270 yards or throw the least amount that he's had all year, you probably would have said that they lost this game, other than the fact that their first game he threw 171 yards. He didn't throw for that many yards in this game, and I think like I was preaching before, I think it was last week where I said that this Seahawks team, their margin of error is so small that because they don't really run the ball well and that their running defense isn't very great either, the fact that you throw it so much with Geno, you can't afford to turn it over as much as they have been doing leading up into this game, because you say you turn the ball over, right, and the other team scores off of it. Now you feel like you have to catch up, and maybe you overcompensate, you throw too much, you don't really become a balanced offense, and you end up suffering from it because you become one-dimensional and things like that. You could throw more interceptions just out of the fact that you're so urgent to tie the game and kind of rectify your mistake, it kind of leads to that. And I thought that overall they had better balance in this game. Kenneth Walker ran for 69 yards. Also, he got involved in the passing game because he had 24 yards receiving and another touchdown as well on his birthday, nonetheless. So he had a great day. He balled out. DK Metcalf added to it with 4 receptions and 99 yards and another touchdown as well for him, but he did leave with a sprained MCL, so he is considered week to week going forward for the Seahawks. And the Falcons on the other end, like I said, not their cleanest game. Kirk Cousins had 232 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. He was also sacked 3 times. Bijan Robinson had a solid game, 21 carries for 103 yards and a touchdown. And Kyle Pitts arguably had the best game of his season with 7 receptions and 65 yards. The tied for the most receptions he's had all year, and just a little bit under the most yards he's had all year. So he had a prominent game, but it wasn't for much because the Falcons only scored 14 points. So it was great performance individually. They were able to get into the red zone a couple times, but also some other times it just really didn't go their way because of their own doing, like I said. And one of the things that stood out was the penalties, because the sloppiness went just beyond the turnovers, right? The turnovers you just can't have happen to you in a game like this, especially when you're riding on a high wave and the Seahawks are probably coming in with not that much hope to beat the Falcons on the road. Still, when you give up the ball so freely and you turn it over 3 times in that game, it's really hard to win in the NFL when you're just giving the opposing team the ball back. And also when you're shooting yourself in the foot, because the Seahawks had 5 penalties for 42 yards in this game, and the Falcons had 9 penalties for 72 yards as well. And on top of the amount of giveaways that they had, that's not winning football. And it doesn't really matter who the opposing team is, other than, I don't know, maybe the worst team in the league. Most teams, if you give them those opportunities and also you hurt yourself with that many penalties, it's going to be a closer game than most people expect. So that was really the biggest thing that I took away from it, because other than the turnovers and the penalties, the Falcons, you would have thought, won this game because they had more plays, they had more total yards in this game, and they had more time of possession. But again, it's the situational type of football moments where you force an errant pass, you get strip sacked, you throw another interception, things like that, and the opposing team is flying all over the field with their defense, is feeling very confident because, like we've talked about before, when these defenses play with a lead, they just pin their ears back and they just run at the quarterback. They're not even thinking about anything to do with coverage or anything like that. So this developed perfectly in a game for the Seahawks to win, and they needed it more, in my opinion, because they were really snowballing there in terms of the losses that were beginning to pile up. And also the fact that the 49ers had lost and now they dropped to 3-4. The Seahawks are sitting at the top of the NFC West yet again with a winning record. So they needed this game more. I'm not completely off the Falcons after a loss like this. I just feel like they just had a pretty rough day, a pretty sloppy day. So I think that'll get corrected. I like their offense a lot, and obviously I'm a big fan of Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons. So they're going to be fine, especially with the injuries to the Bucs. They're going to be playing them this week, so they should get back to winning. But this was a big win for the Seahawks, so I had to make sure I gave them some love and I shouted them out in today's episode. But now, I promise, we are officially done with Week 7. Now we're going to look ahead to Week 8 and start talking about Sunday Night Football. Still a few days away, but it's a big one on Sunday Night Football between the Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. Who needs to win this game more? And also we're going to go through our predictions, the matchups, and all the things like that in our typical preview. So we'll be right back with that segment and also the conclusion of today's show. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, previewing a game here that we have coming up in Week 8 of the NFL, and it's a big one, and it's very adequately put on Sunday Night Football because we're going to have a matchup between two teams with a lot of recent history with one another. We'll see the Dallas Cowboys coming off of their bye week to travel to the San Francisco 49ers this week off of their bye. Like I said, San Francisco is coming off of consecutive home losses, and now they're also sitting at 3-4. Not the record we would have imagined for a team that just made it to the Super Bowl, but a lot of circumstances have been, placed on the 49ers now with all the injuries and things like that. So that's one thing. The Cowboys enter this game at 3-3, trying to quiet the noise as much as possible with all the, everything we've seen from the talks about Jerry Jones and what he's been saying, on Mike McCarthy, on, the radio host interaction that he had and things like that, on Derrick Henry. Also, Dak mentioning how they're not practicing hard enough, and Mike McCarthy voicing those same concerns. So it's all of that, and the fact that, everybody just keeps, dogging them for, not being a well put together football team. So they're trying to quiet the noise a little bit and trying to get back in the win column with a big win here. It would be a huge win for them because of the recent history. We look at the last four matchups between these two teams, and we look back at last year where San Francisco destroyed the Dallas Cowboys at home 42-10 last year in San Francisco. They're going to be there yet again this year. Also, you go even further back, there was that playoff win over the Dallas Cowboys in 2022 at home as well, 19-12, and even back to 2021 in a playoff game there at Dallas where the 49ers won again, and the Cowboys, went crashing out of the playoffs that year as well. So over the last four matchups, the 49ers have won all of them. And, it's also, like I said, similarly with the Chiefs and 49ers and their recent history, it's time for the Cowboys to kind of punch back a little bit. They can't just keep getting knocked down and kicked while they're down. They have to react a little bit, and I think it certainly helps coming off of their bye. And both teams have not really looked anything like we really thought they would. We had high expectations for the 49ers, but even the Cowboys, we definitely expected them to be better. I mean, they're 3-3. It's not the end of the world, but the way that they look on the field, I think that's really been a big shock for everybody. So that's, the initial coverage of that. But looking more so at the 49ers here to start, something just feels off about this team to me. I might be the only one to think it, but the losses to Arizona and the Rams were both comebacks that they gave up late in those games, and an established, I think, well put together team wouldn't allow those comebacks to happen, especially in how close they were to each other. And also, last week, they had a great chance to respond to some of those questionable losses with a sort of litmus test with playing the Kansas City Chiefs again in that Super Bowl rematch, and they didn't rise to the challenge, in my opinion. Of course, the injuries are a factor, and we talked about it yesterday, how I really wasn't too happy with how I saw the 49ers play and just how the Chiefs just looked so much better than them the following year after both of them made it to the Super Bowl. It looks like one team has reevaluated themselves, has found a way to reinvent themselves really in the Kansas City Chiefs, and the 49ers have been sort of stuck in their same ways. It hasn't really been working out for them, but also the injuries I do admit and I do acknowledge that are a big part of the story, because now Brandon Ayuk is out for the rest of 2024. George Kittle seems like he continues to get banged up, and Deebo Samuel just missed basically the entire game because he had pneumonia, and he developed that at some point during the game, I'm assuming, based on the reports and whatnot. You have Christian McCaffrey's calf injury that he's still not back from, and someone that I almost forgot to mention, Javon Hargrave, their nose tackle, their interior defensive lineman, he's out or has been out for the entire 2024 year because he tore his pec muscle early on in the year. And all of that combined, plus the fact that, I don't know, if it's not that, it might be something else, but it just really hasn't looked the same that we had last year. And I feel like there's a real concern now going forward because it looked off already, and now you're not going to have Brandon Ayuk. You might or may not have Debo or Kittle playing with them nursing their injuries. How is this team going to look now that they're down another man and they already haven't been playing well? So that's how I'm kind of thinking about this game for the 49ers and all the factors that I'm thinking about with them. How, I don't know, I'm not really sold on them yet because of what I've seen so far. And you look at the Cowboys, talking about not being sold on them. They had their bye week last week in week 7 that helped. Hopefully people forget about the 47-9 loss they had at home. That's their third loss this year. All of their losses have been at home this year. And if you go back to last year as well, that's 4 straight home games where they've lost. And not only lost, but they've been blown out in every single one of them. So it's not good. It's not a good sign whatsoever. And it seems like there's just a lot of panic with this team. And as much as maybe Dak will say to the media, or CeeDee, or even Jerry Jones will still say that they believe in the players that they have and what they have going there in Dallas, it doesn't really look like it because, like I said before, with the comments Jerry Jones is making, Dak Prescott also mentioning the practice scenario and how they're not practicing hard enough. You have Troy Aikman even noticing it by criticizing their receivers, most of all also because of what we've seen and the personnel and the fact that they didn't improve from what we saw last year and how they got run on. They got run on pretty easily last year, and not only did they not add anybody, they lost a lot of starters. So we already knew that their personnel wasn't the greatest, but now it looks like they're living in the worst possible scenario on how this entire thing could have turned out for them with their season and how it's going so far. But they also have their own injuries to deal with. DeMarcus Lawrence is still on the IR. He's not going to play. Deron Bland could have a chance to come back. I'll be interested to see how he sort of develops over the next couple of days leading up into Sunday, especially Sunday night as well. And there's still that uncertainty with Micah Parsons because I feel like he is coming back. There is maybe a slight chance he plays, but it's not 100% guaranteed. So whether or not he plays or doesn't play could have a big implication on this game. And you look at the overall picture with the Cowboys, they're only a game or a game and a half back of the Commanders or the Philadelphia Eagles. They're still right there with those two teams. So, for as bad as we've, just kicked them and how bad we've criticized them, they're still kind of right there. They're teetering, certainly, but right now at this moment, they're technically right there at 3-3, so they have that to play for. But now looking at the matchups for this game and how I kind of see it playing out based on these performances, we have the one being San Francisco's running game against the Dallas Cowboys' run defense, right? The idea of defending the run for the Cowboys still hasn't really resonated with them. They're executing it or not even executing it to an acceptable level, and it's become evident in all these home losses, right? With the Ravens running all over them, the Saints definitely ran all over them. Also, the Lions, obviously with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, they had a day. So how do the 49ers try and take advantage of that, right? Because they have, they don't have their main guy, but as well, they have Jordan Mason. They have some of the younger guys that have kind of stepped up over the last couple weeks. So are they able to take advantage of that? Also knowing for Dallas's defense to kind of benefit them a little bit more, knowing that you don't have to worry about Brandon Ayuk, and how much does that let you pile up and stack the box a little bit more. That is another interesting factor that could play a role in this matchup, and this will be a huge matchup to determine how this game is played out. But also, the other one that I had in mind was the 49ers pass rush against the Dallas Cowboys offensive line, who again, haven't been very well. They got their butts kicked against the Detroit Lions. And also, though, the 49ers have only recorded 4 sacks over their last 3 games. So they're not really overbearing teams with the amount of pressure they do get, or they're not really sacking teams with that high of frequency. So, are the Cowboys able to stand up against a 49ers pass rush that really hasn't fully been there? They can get there, but they haven't been there yet. Or are the 49ers pass rushers just going to unleash everything that they have all over this Dallas offensive line, and it's going to look non-existent yet again? That'll be an interesting thing to follow as well. And lastly, I want to say quickly is the red zone conversion rate, because that has been a problem for the 49ers, especially if they can't run the ball in short space areas. Who's able to convert more in the red zone, who's able to get to the red zone with frequently also and take advantage of it when they're there, are all going to be huge factors and key matchups to watch in this game. But who needs this game more is the same answer I will give for my prediction. I believe the 49ers will win this game because I believe they need to win this game more, because the Cowboys, I keep saying they're like a ship out at sea, just kind of drifting. I think people are more aware of the fact that the Cowboys are really not going to do anything this year, and I think more people are accepting of the fact that the Cowboys might not even make the playoffs this year, as crazy as it sounds. So nobody's really there yet with the 49ers. If the 49ers somehow, I don't think they're going to miss the playoffs, but if they're close or anything like that, or say maybe they don't win their division, it's going to look very bad, especially this game where they've just dominated the Cowboys over the last 4 games straight. If they lose this game for how disoriented and just how bad the Dallas Cowboys look, there's going to be a lot of questions to be had on Monday for this 49ers team that not only would lose at home for a 3rd consecutive home game, but also be 3-5 in an NFC conference, which just isn't what this 49ers team is or should be. So they need this game more, and I believe they're going to win it. They're going to shake off these bad vibes, these concerns over the last couple weeks and win this game, because they have to win this game. They better win this game or it's going to be very bad. I don't know if it'll be bad, worse for the 49ers on the following Monday than it ever has been for the Cowboys, quite honestly. So, yeah, I believe the 49ers will win that game. We're going to have more predictions and things like that on tomorrow's show. But for right now, that'll be everything I have for you guys on today's episode. Thank you guys for joining me. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. And check out more of the live show on both YouTube channels and more content around the NFL with me, your host, Manny Maradiaga, in a variety of different ways. And lastly, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more of these live shows to get involved in them and whatnot. We'll be here tomorrow and Friday to close out the week. But for right now, we're going to sign off, and we'll be back tomorrow with previewing Thursday Night Football and looking ahead to the weekend.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't